What I wanted to talk to you about was a little bit about our election process, but because this is a rare opportunity, I also wanted to leave some time for you all to ask any questions. I can cover anything from U.S. elections to also, life as a foreign service officer, as a U.S. diplomat. We can talk about the career, we can talk about kind of whatever it is you all want to talk about, life in the United States as well. So I want to, we can try and stick to some of the program, but I realize it's a Friday afternoon and I want all of you to, enjoy this presentation as well. I don't want it to go into one ear and come out the other and then we kind of forget what we were talking about. So let's just keep this fun, okay? So to begin with, when we're speaking about elections in the United States, it's like we have a lot of the same problems that a lot of us in this world have, and that is, how can a nation have representation geographically? How do you balance the local issues? For example, someone from Mindanao might have different interests in local issues versus someone from Luzon. But at the same time, there's also national issues that we have to take into account. So the idea here is for everybody's voice to be heard. United States, as you may know, is a very big country, both population-wise, geographically, and in each geographic region, there are certain populations and certain people who care about different kinds of issues, and as well as universal issues. So what the founders of the United States, what they came up with was a way so that everybody's voice could be heard, and that's through the Electoral College. So before we begin, I wanted to show you a brief video. It's kind of interesting. It's got a lot of information packed in there. So I wanted to show the video first, and then after that, we can go over a little bit of a presentation and kind of reiterate what it is that they were talking about, and then we can open it up for any kinds of questions you have. Right? That sound good? All right, wonderful. All right, we're gonna start the video.
For years, Americans who are 18 or older have a big responsibility. Our votes decide who becomes the President of the United States. Unfortunately, the U.S. election system isn't that simple. This is electing a U.S. President in plain English. It's easy to imagine every U.S. citizen's vote being counted together on Election Day, but this is not the case. U.S. elections are not decided by the total or popular vote, but individual states. Let me explain. It starts with your vote. On Election Day, you'll vote for president and their vice president. You get one choice. Then, all the votes in your state are counted. The candidate with the most statewide votes becomes the candidate your state supports for president. This happens across the country until each state has selected their candidate. We end up with most of the 50 states and the District of Columbia voting to support one candidate each. But there's a problem. We can't elect a president by just counting up the choices of these states. U.S. states are different. Consider this. California has about 4 million people. Kansas has less than 3 million. We need a way for California's choice to have more influence on the election because the state has more people. The question becomes, how do we make sure each state has the right amount of influence on the election? Well, we need a way to account for the population of each state. As an example, let's consider my home state of North Carolina. Like every state, it is divided up into congressional districts that are based on population. North Carolina has 13 districts, California has 53, Kansas has 4. When it comes to a state's influence on the election, the number of districts matters most. More population equals more districts equals more influence. The influence a state has in the election is measured by the number of electors. This number comes from the number of districts in a state plus the number of U.S. senators, which is always 2. North Carolina has 15 electors, while California has 55. When a candidate wins the voting in a state, they win that state's number of electors. That's why big, populous states can be so important to candidates. Their electors add up quickly, and the number of electors is what really matters. If you add up the electors of all 50 states in the District of Columbia, there are 538 in total. The candidate's goal on election day is to win the majority of 538, or 270 electors. Once a candidate wins enough states to reach the 270 majority, they have won the election and become the president-elect. Yay! So, let's recap. Your vote helps your state choose a single candidate. That candidate receives all the electors from your state. The candidate who can win enough states, 270 total electors, wins the national election and becomes the president-elect. Then, on the following January 20th, the president-elect is sworn in as the next president of the United States. And it all starts with your vote. Make it count. I'm Lee Lefevre, and this has been Electing a U.S. President.
I want to talk to you about the Electoral College and why it matters. All right, I know this doesn't sound like the most sensational topic of the day, but stay with me because I think it's one of the most important. To explain why requires a very brief civics review. The President and Vice President of the United States are not chosen by a nationwide popular vote of the American people. Rather, they are chosen by 538 electors. This process is spelled out in the United States Constitution. Why did the founders and let the presidential candidate with the most votes claim victory? Why did they create? And why do we continue to need this electoral college? The answer is understanding not only the electoral college, but also America. The founders had no intention of creating a pure majority rule democracy. They knew from careful study of history what most have forgotten today or never learned. Pure democracies do not work. They implode. Democracy has been colorfully described as two wolves and a lamb voting on what's for dinner. In a pure democracy, bare majorities can easily tyrannize the rest of the country. The founders wanted to avoid this at all costs. This is why we have three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial. It's why each state has 2 senators, no matter what its population, but also different numbers of representatives based entirely on population. It's why it takes a supermajority in Congress and 3/4 of the states to change the Constitution. And it's why we have the Electoral College. Here's how the Electoral College works. The presidential election has 3 phases. The first phase is purely democratic. We hold 51 popular elections every presidential election year, 1 in each state and 1 in DC. On election day in 2012, you may have thought you were voting for Barack Obama or Mitt Romney, but you were really voting for a slate of presidential electors. In Rhode Island, for example, if you voted for Barack Obama, you voted for the state's 4 Democratic electors. If you voted for Mitt Romney, you were really voting for the state's 4 Republican electors. Part 2 of the election was held in December, and it is this December election among the state's 538 electors, not the November election, which officially determines the identity of the next president. At least 270 votes are needed to win. Why is this so important? Because the system encourages coalition building and national campaigning. In order to win, a candidate must have the support of many different types of voters from various parts of the country. Winning only the South or the Midwest is not good enough. You cannot win 270 electoral votes if only one part of the country is supporting you. But if winning were only about getting the most votes, a candidate might concentrate all of his efforts in the biggest cities or the biggest states. Why would that candidate care about what people in West Virginia or Iowa or Montana think? But you might ask, isn't the election really in the so-called swing states? Actually, no. If nothing else, safe and swing states are constantly changing. California voted safely Republican as recently as 1988. Texas used to vote Democrat. Neither New Hampshire nor Virginia used to be swing states. Most people think that George W. Bush won the 2000 election because of Florida. Well, sort of. But he really won the election because he managed to flip one state which the Democrats thought was safe, West Virginia. Its 4 electoral votes turned out to be decisive. No political party can ignore any state for too long without suffering the consequences. Every state, and therefore every voter in every state is important. The Electoral College also makes it harder to steal elections. It must be stolen in the right state in order to change the outcome of the Electoral College. With so many swing states, it is hard to predict and hard to do. But without the Electoral College, any vote stolen in any precinct in the country could affect the national outcome, even if that vote was easily stolen in the bluest California precinct or the reddest Texas one. The Electoral College is an ingenious method of selecting a president for a great, diverse republic such as our own. It protects against the tyranny of the majority, encourages coalition building, and discourages voter fraud. Our founders were proud of it. We can be too. I'm Tara Ross with Craig University.
Okay. All right. So we saw 2 back-to-back videos. And like I said, I know it's a lot of information to capture. Okay. First of all, could everybody hear the videos? Was the connection okay? Could you hear and kind of understand what they were talking about? Raise your hand if yes. Okay, great. So we have a little bit more of an idea of how the U.S. selects their president. Now we're going to go really quick to a slideshow, and I'm going to go fast. I'm probably going to skip some slides as well, okay? So let's talk about the presidential election process and how it works, okay? So this is a great question. After watching those videos, those of you, the U.S. president is directly elected by the votes of the American people. Is this true or false? Oh, great job, great job. Now I know that everybody was paying attention and not just closing off. All right. So it's not directly chosen by that. He's chosen by the 538 people, the members of the Electoral College, and each of the states that win, he gets all of those votes from that state, and together they add up to the 538 people of the Electoral College, okay? So you've heard a lot about Republicans and Democrats, right? Those are, in the United States, they are the 2 political parties that throughout history have sustained and lasted. Now, if you go back to the beginning of U.S. history, there have been other ones that have popped up. And even, you know, recently you'll get some independent parties, but the 2 long-lasting ones are the Democrats and the Republicans. And because we don't have enough time, we're not going to go into too many details, but you might see that the Republicans are sometimes represented by an elephant and the Democrats are represented by a donkey, okay? It doesn't mean because that's their favorite animal. It was from a political cartoon and that's how they decided. So every 4 years we elect our U.S. president. And before we elect the president, we have 2 types of elections when it comes to presidential elections, okay? We have the primary election and the general election. When I say primary, that is where we decide which candidates from the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are going to run for the election, the general election. Once those candidates are chosen, then we go to a general election between those 2 candidates. Between the lead for the Republican Party and the lead for the Democratic Party as well, okay? Can anybody tell me, do you remember the last election? Who was the candidate, the Democratic candidate for the United States in the last election in 2012?
Could you raise your hand? Proceed in front to answer the question.
Who was the Democratic nominee for the president election?
Go, guys.
I didn't hear that. Can you say it one more time?
Could you shout your answer?
Hi, sir. Good afternoon. I think for the Democratic Party, Mr. Barack Obama, and for the Republican, it's Mr. Romney.
Very good. Excellent answer. If I was there right now, I would give you candy or something because you did a great job. So you're absolutely right. That was kind of a trick question. because Barack Obama was already our commander-in-chief, our president. But every 4 years, that president, for at least 2 terms, they get the opportunity, we have to re-elect them to continue on. So that was an excellent answer. Very good. Barack Obama was the Democratic candidate, and he ended up defeating Mitt Romney in the general election in 2012. All right, so move on. There we go. So let me breeze through this. Oh, and like I said, I'm going to skip some of this because I wanted to get to your question. Can I roll it down? One moment. Okay, there's a general election. We already talked about the Electoral College. Okay. We've talked about this. What I really wanted to get to was, okay, you heard something about the swing states, okay? The reason in the presentation they call them swing states is because in the United States, some states historically have belonged to one of the parties, either a Republican state or a Democratic state. For example, they use the example of Texas. In Texas, historically, and the last couple decades, it has been a solid Republican state, which means that many times the Democratic candidate can go and visit and try and advertise who they are, try and publicize and get votes. But for the most part, Texas has been more Republican. And the reason is for different reasons. They just believe in that region more in the Republican way. The issue is with these swing states where there's not necessarily a Republican or a Democratic majority. So each year you'll see the presidential candidates fighting in those swing states and spending a lot of money to try and recruit those voters, to tip the scales to get to the 240 votes they need. This is an important stat. A lot of people ask who can become president in the United States, okay? So basically, as you know, since 1947, we've had we've only allowed 2 4-year terms in office. So 8 years is the maximum a U.S. president can be elected. The qualifications, you must be over 35 years of age. You must be a natural-born citizen. You cannot be naturalized. And you must have been a permanent resident of the U.S. for at least 14 years. Okay? So like they said, any candidate who wants to run for president can. However, to have a realistic shot, many times they've had to align themselves with either the Republicans or the Democrats because they have the power and the sway to get that person elected. Okay? Here's some faces of who's running for this year. Does anybody know some of these faces here that are on TV? Can somebody tell me who this person is? Did you say Hillary Clinton? Did you say Hillary Clinton? Okay, very good. Yes, absolutely. Hillary Clinton was actually our former boss as a Foreign Service officer. She was also the ex-Secretary of State, and she's the one who controls the Foreign Service in the United States, all of the relations with the exterior. Very good. Let's go to some of the Republican candidates. Now, he's been getting a lot of TV time lately. I think everybody kind of knows who this person is, right? Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is an interesting case right now for the Republicans because a lot of people didn't think that he was going to garner as much attention and support as he has. But he's come in and he started leading the polls for the Republican. Now remember, we have a lot of Republican candidates here. And before we can determine who's going to be the Republican candidate, they have to be elected amongst themselves. So we're going to get one representative from the Republican side and one from the Democratic side to go for the general election. Okay? And I think we're coming up on it. So this is going to conclude our presentation, our PowerPoint presentation. And now what I wanted to do was I wanted to turn it over to you all because I wanted to ask you and leave the floor open for any questions. Like I said, it could be about elections. It could be about, about the Foreign Service in general. It could be about me, whatever it is you want to ask, okay? I'm sorry, I can't. You're gonna have to speak up a little bit because it's hard for me to hear. I guess raise your hand and then step forward to the microphone
And in the camera as well.
and in the camera too.
Good afternoon, Minister. I just would like to ask about the issue on voter fraud. How do the U.S. elections prevent voter fraud in your time of election?
Could you move in front of the web camera?
Yeah, you
please?
can come over here.
Yes. You may. We can
Yeah.
hear you.
And then
You
just,
don't have to use the microphone.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just come talk to the camera. That's okay.
Hello. What's your name again?
Hello. Sir, I just want to ask how your elections prevent voter fraud. Like, what is always the issue here in the Philippines, like selling votes or whatnot?
Sure. And your name again, I'm sorry?
Your name again?
Jenny, sir.
Jennifer. Jennifer, thank you. Jennifer, thank you. That's an excellent question. So voter fraud, obviously, that's a universal concern. We have the same concern in the United States, and all of you are so young. I'm like the old man in the room, so I don't know if you remember whenever there was a big, issue and it was a big problem whenever it was the elections with George Bush and Al Gore, and that's whenever the vote was actually decided by so few. There have been a lot of solutions that people have been trying to come up with on how to stop voter fraud. Okay, one of the ways that they've been able to do it is after those elections happened, what they started doing was they started moving away from the paper ballots, and now they started going more towards electronic ballots. Electronic ballots that are securely stored, because what happens with paper ballots is you have a lot of people who are counting these ballots, who are making human errors, who are also, maybe on purpose, because they have some kind of interest, miscounting and things like that. And even though you have controls, they've decided to move away from a lot of the paper ballots, and now it's done more electronically. That's one way to stop that aspect, but it's still going to be a big challenge because you have candidates all the time who sometimes say that the other candidate will, in not so many ways pay for votes. They'll go and pick people up and give them food and give them clothes to come and vote, and bring people in poor neighborhoods out by the bus loads and hundreds so they can vote and things like that. So it's something that I think will be very, very difficult to eliminate 100%. But I can tell you that the United States has invested millions and millions of dollars in trying to better the system so that we can help prevent it. Next question. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. Do you have more questions?
And tell us your name.
So good afternoon. So my question is, how do the America choose those 538 voters?
Can you tell me one more time? I'm sorry.
How do the Americans choose those 538 voters?
Oh, the 538 voters. Yeah, the Electoral College. That's a great question. What's your name? Ev? Okay. Thank you very much, Ev. That's a great question. So, what happens is each party, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, they choose the people who are going to participate in the Electoral College. So say Wyoming, they have, 3 Electoral College votes. They will choose, the Republican Party will choose the 3 people that if the Republican candidate wins that state, those are the people that will go to Washington and cast their votes after the general election, okay? So usually they're going to choose the most loyal, the most dedicated to their party to ensure that that person goes and votes based on what the popular vote came in, based on what their party wants to vote. However, what we still have is we have human error, not machines. So it has happened in the past that, say, the Republican Party or the Democratic Party has chosen their electors from that state. They've gone on to do the Electoral College vote, because remember, it's not the general election that casts the presidents, that chooses the president, it's the Electoral College. In the past, there have been times where a member of the Electoral College who was selected by one party has changed their vote in the last minute and voted for the other candidate. Fortunately, this has never changed the result of an election or the outcome of an election. And also, to prevent it, there are states that put laws in place to punish those. I think 17 states punish Electoral College participants who do not vote as the state is asked. But that's how they're chosen. They're chosen by the Republican or the Democratic Party. Any more questions?
So good afternoon, sir. I'm Kai. So as you have mentioned, there are a lot of universal issues, especially when it comes to national elections. And my question is basically rooted on the fact that big money is running elections. It is experienced here in the Philippines as well. In my perception, it's also experienced in the United States. So my question is, are there actions taken by the government to avoid the influence in the government or in the conduct of the president's duties once he is elected? Because I think that, in my perception, I think that you have this form of indebtedness towards your donors or the people who have provided for your campaign. So as I repeat my question, are there actions taken by the government to avoid their influence in the conduct of their president? Thank you.
Okay, hang on. Before we go, I just want to make sure I got your question right. So are you talking about big money and lobbyists controlling presidents in that sense? Was that, you don't have to use a microphone, just talking to the computer, because I think the microphone makes more of an echo.
Yeah.
So just talk straight into the computer. So can you tell me one more time, was I right? Was that your question?
Yeah, that's basically my question, sir. I just want to really understand what's the influence that this big money is doing on how the president conducts his duties once he is in office.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. That's a very good question. And thank you for that. So obviously, anytime you're going to run for president and anytime you're going to be elected, one of the most important things is raising money. Unfortunately, that's the reality of it. Why do you need money? You need money to fund your campaign. You need money to advertise. You need money and support to get votes. So this is another issue, just like voter fraud, that the United States has to combat all the time. One of the ways that we can help control that is through our votes, through the national election. So, and I think that's also one of the reasons why one of the arguments that Donald Trump uses for the election for his side, that he does not receive money. He's the one who donates money. I think the American public in general wants to see a fair election. Obviously, we all want to see a fair election. And as far as being able to, as far as the government putting in stopgaps to ensure that big money doesn't control the government, well, that's why we have a government full of checks and balances. So, you know, the executive branch, the legislative, and the judicial branch, they balance each other out. I can tell you that it is always a big concern, just like voter fraud. I don't know the exact specifics of the laws in place, but I know there are laws in place when it comes to, you know, buying, you know, obviously and grossly buying political influence. That's not allowed. However, you know, presidential candidates, a lot of their policy is based on the people who are going to support them. If you have a union or somebody supporting you, and they're, you know, they're guaranteed for millions of votes, obviously it's their policy that the president is probably going to use on their agenda if it fits the president's, you know, initiative. So that's why the debates are important. It's important to hold presidents responsible. And I think the United States has a very open communication system, an open media who's very harshly critical at times of our presidents on why they, when they were getting elected, they say one thing, but yet they failed to, to follow through, or they've changed their stand on that. I think one way we combat it is through the freedom of our media, of our press, on being able to report freely. And the fact that in America, you can challenge your leaders, you can write your congressman. He's working for me, my congressman from the state of, my senator from the state of Texas. I'm from Texas. If there's something that he's doing that I don't like, I can write him. The president as well. We're all public servants. So I think the whole way of preventing money from controlling everything is trying to be as transparent as possible. And the United States is always trying to do that when it comes to public policy.
Okay, so maybe we can accommodate one more question.
Thank you, Bo. Thank you, sir, for your time.
Thank you very much for your question.
Okay, one last question.
One last question before the weekend.
Hi, sir. My name is Therese, and I would like, considering the existence of the swing states and the battleground states and numerous other factors, how do you solve the predicament of having a tie in the tallying of the votes? And has there been an occurrence in the history of American elections?
Sure. That's a great question. As a matter of fact, there have been. So if you do the calculations of the votes, it is possible there can be a tie. And it's happened twice in our history, as a matter of fact. So everybody's trying to get to 270 votes, right? But if there's a tie, all of a sudden, in the Electoral College, yeah, you can go all the way down. There's 269 votes. Are you hearing this? Oh, yeah. So you relied on that, as a matter of fact. We didn't get a chance to see. So if you can see here, if there's a tie, it goes to our other branch, our legislative branch, to resolve it. So what happens is, just like presidential elections, our senators and our House of Representatives, they're elected as well in a general election. They're comprised of Republicans and Democrats and some independents. And in the case of a tie, which has occurred, the House of Representatives, they will select the votes for the president, and the Senate will select the votes for the vice president. So basically, whoever controls the House of Representatives and who controls the Senate will have a say. Whichever party controls the majority of that usually will be the party that elects which candidate will be president and which candidate will be vice president. But an excellent question.
Thank you so much. Before we go, we would just like to thank you, Sir Mr. Michael Barrera, for giving us a detailed background on how U.S. election works. So I hope you've learned a lot, and I hope you've learned papers or essays about United States government. Okay, before we end this weekend, so we would like to share some of what we do here at the Thomas Jefferson Information Center. So you can see our, so we are the American Spaces of the United States Embassy. So we exemplify the U.S. commitment to a core tenet of democracy for citizens' right to free access to information. So we are spaces for information. We are spaces for conversations, like what we are doing right now. We are doing a lot of digital engagement with our 14 American corners and also with our 32 American shelves using Skype and Google Hangouts. So if you have more requests for the future, please let us know. Please let Miss Lee from the American Corner to have a request for Google Hangouts with our speakers here at the U.S. Embassy. And we also do storytelling, Philippine-American Friendship Day program. We also have massive open online courses. What are we? This is what we're doing right now here at the embassy. We have our ongoing massive open online course about entrepreneurship. So we have invited young entrepreneurs to talk about massive open online courses. We also share our social media pages, and we also promote Education USA. So aside from all programs, we are spaces for collaboration. So we have 14 American corners all throughout the Philippines and 32 American shelves that help us to promote the 5 E's: environment, education, civic engagement. What else? I forgot. So it's more entrepreneurship and economic development. Great. So I hope you will like our Facebook page. It's facebook.com/am-spaces-ph. It's AM Spaces page. Like our Facebook page, and then we will post there more programs, more digital engagement with you guys. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed. So good luck with your studies there, and good luck in your government seminar about politics. Thank you very much. Bye.